SITREP World Briefing for May 1st, 2026. The Trump administration and members of Congress clashed in Washington on May 1st over whether continued U.S. military action tied to Iran still required approval under the War Powers Resolution. Lawmakers argued that once hostilities reached the 60-day mark, Congress had to authorize an extension or the president would have to withdraw forces, while the White House and Pentagon rejected the idea that a new vote was immediately required. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the reporting deadline to Congress pauses or stops during a ceasefire, and the administration separately argued that the Iran war had been terminated, meaning no further congressional approval was necessary. That position directly contradicted lawmakers pressing the War Powers timetable, leaving Congress deadlocked over whether the president must seek formal authorization for any continued operations involving U.S. forces. President Donald Trump said on April 30th that the United States was studying possible troop cuts in Germany as his dispute with Chancellor Merz deepened over the U.S. approach to the war in Iran. The Germany remarks were made a day before Trump expanded the idea to other European deployments, separating the Germany review from the later comments on Italy and Spain. On May 1st, Trump said his administration was also looking at reducing the U.S. military presence in Italy and Spain after clashes with their leaders over the Iran war. The comments made on Thursday link possible changes in U.S. force posture across southern Europe to the same transatlantic dispute and came one day after he publicly floated reductions in Germany. Brazil's Congress voted on May 1st to drastically reduce the prison sentence imposed on former President Jair Bolsonaro, a move that reopened one of the country's biggest post-election political battles. Bolsonaro had been sentenced to 27 years in prison, and lawmakers in Brasilia approved a plan to cut that term sharply. The congressional action targeted the sentence Bolsonaro received after being convicted of plotting a coup following his election defeat. The decision marked a major intervention by lawmakers in a case tied to Brazil's democratic institutions and is expected to face further legal and political challenges. The United States imposed sanctions on former Democratic Republic of Congo President Joseph Kabila on May 1st, accusing him of supporting the M23 rebel movement and its ally, the Congo River Alliance. Washington said the sanctions were tied to alleged backing for armed groups operating in the conflict-hit east of the country. U.S. officials said Kabila was being targeted over alleged efforts to destabilize the Congolese government, while the accusations centered on support for the Rwanda-backed M23 rebellion. Kabila had not responded to the U.S. claims by May 1st. The French government on May 1st publicly backed an exemption allowing bakeries and florists to open on Labor Day, a holiday that is ordinarily protected as a paid day off. Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu used a village bakery visit to show support for the measure, arguing that fresh bread and flowers are part of May Day traditions in France and should remain available despite the normal closure rules. Across France on May 1st, unions mobilized for Labor Day to defend the legal status of the holiday as a paid day off, saying government efforts to permit openings in some sectors would weaken a long-standing worker protection. The demonstrations and union messaging focused on preserving May 4th labor rights more broadly, as the government pushed to let selected businesses operate on the holiday. China said it will extend zero-tariff treatment from Friday to nearly all African countries that have diplomatic ties with Beijing, removing duties for every African nation except Eswatini, the only country on the continent that recognizes Taiwan. Beijing described the move as a significant step to deepen China-Africa trade and investment ties and broaden market access for African exports to China. The policy gives Beijing a fresh trade and diplomatic initiative in Africa, where China has expanded commercial and political ties for years. Analysts cited in the report said the zero-tariff regime could strengthen China's soft power, while the benefits are likely to be uneven because countries with stronger export capacity will be better placed to take advantage of tariff-free access than poorer or less industrialized economies. The U.S.-Iran standoff disrupted shipping through the Strait of Hormuz on May 1st and pushed oil prices to their highest level since 2022, as markets reacted to the risk of further military escalation and tighter flows from the Gulf. The blockage of the waterway sent shockwaves through global supply chains, with traders, carriers, and importers recalculating cargo movements and energy costs tied to one of the world's most important oil transit routes. The disruption also lifted freight costs as cargoes were rerouted and fuel bills rose, squeezing transport companies well beyond the Gulf. In Singapore, freight forwarders said higher shipping expenses and Middle East conflict-related detours cut into margins, underscoring how the Strait of Hormuz confrontation was raising costs for logistics firms and import-dependent economies across Asia. Myanmar's military government said Thursday, April 30th, that ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi had been moved from prison to house arrest. The ruling junta said the 80-year-old Nobel Peace Prize laureate would serve the remainder of her sentence at home after being detained since the military seized power in the 2021 coup. The announcement marked a significant change in the junta's handling of Suu Kyi, who has been imprisoned for years following her removal from office. The military said the decision was taken by the head of the ruling junta, now acting as president, shifting the former leader from detention in prison to house arrest in Myanmar as she continues serving her sentence. Sources are available at sitrepbrief.com.